Okay, so you clicked on this video and now you're probably wondering if Izuku is going to be OP or if I'm going to nerf him. And the answer to that question is yes. Yes, I am. But that could mean either or. So now you have to watch to the end of the video. By the way, The Incredibles will be in this series. So yeah, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Alright, before I start the video, I just quickly want to say that this idea has been on my mind for a while, at least a year. I got recommended this idea a long time ago by a subscriber, but I never ended up doing it because Kid Zeus, another popular What If YouTuber, did the idea before me, and I genuinely really liked his take on the series. However, he deleted it, and I'm guessing it's not coming back. So, with the fact that I rewatched The Incredibles the other day, and I just was completely ensnared by just Jack's completely OP powers, I was like, you know what? Let me do it. You know what? It's been long enough and I might as well give it to you guys in a movie format. So here it is. So I'd like to get one quick thing off my chest before we do start this video, and that's going to be The Incredibles' ages and timeline. The way that this is all going to be fitting in is essentially going to be in a little bit of a strange way. So The Incredibles, we all know how it all worked out. So The Incredibles in the original are like 44, 38 and 40 respectively in the series, right? When we see them. But this time I'm going to be making it so that the way that everything ends up working out and Izuku and all that ends up being born is essentially Mr. Incredible is going to be an American hero, right? He's doing his thing in America. All Might, as we know, traveled to America and did a little bit of hero work there. That's, I think, where he met David Shield. So all three of them are going to be meeting each other and becoming some pretty good friends. Eventually, Toshinori, or All Might, ends up inviting Mr. Incredible to Japan. He ends up going, he enjoys his time there. He meets a beautiful woman by the name of Anko Midoriya, or Elastigirl, and he ends up marrying her. Now, when he marries her, they end up having kids at the age of 20 and 18 respectively. Barely legal. But essentially, with that said, let's say that about, let's see. Okay, so they're going to be having Violet at that age, and they're going to be having Dash like 2 years later. So that's going to be making them like 22 and like 20. Yeah, 22 and 20. So by the time that both of them end up making it to the point where like Violet actually makes it to UA and Dash makes it to like middle school, they're both already like pretty good in terms of being pro heroes, so that they're not exactly too old by the time that Izuku essentially becomes at the age of 15. His parents are both only going to be 45, 43, with his older sister Violet being 25, Dash being 23, and Izuku being 15. That's where the timeline is going to start. But before we get into that, I need to cover a little bit of backstory as to what happens before that. So here it is. Essentially, Izuku is going to be in the care of his mom, right? You know, they're doing their things, and eventually he becomes 4 years old. He still hasn't unlocked his quirk yet. Actually, nah, I take that back. He's not going to be 4 years old. He's going to be 1 year old. I want to do it a little bit differently than usual. He's going to be 1 year old, and he ends up going to the doctor for his yearly physical. What ends up happening is essentially he goes in, and they end up asking, you know, Mrs. Incredible, or Elastigirl, how everything's going. Like, how is the baby? Like, yada, yada, yada. She ends up saying that, you know, it's a healthy baby overall. They end up doing their tests. Everything goes perfect. And out of nowhere, out of absolutely nowhere, the doctor touches Izuku in a way that Izuku did not like. And what ends up happening from here is essentially Izuku gets enraged and he turns into his demonic form, where the doctors are like, what? But Izuku then jumps on this man and starts biting on him and ripping his hair off. And just so you know, this is Dr. Ujiko, by the way. And he proceeds to absolutely destroy this man, to the point where Dr. Ujiko was like, yup, I'm not dealing with this. But essentially, after that happens, they end up realizing that this kid unlocked his quirk at the age of 1, bro. This kid can't even speak yet, and he already has a quirk. It's unprecedented. He has some sort of demonic like transformation type quirk, mutation of some sorts. And they would end up sitting Deku down. But suddenly, he ends up teleporting out of their field of vision. And this is when they realize Izuku has multiple quirks. Now, what are these multiple quirks? I'm about to break them down for you guys. Essentially, his powers are as follows. Electrokinesis, so he can shoot out lightning. He has the ability to transform his body into metal, hardening himself, much like Tetsu. He has levitation, like Nana Shimura, super strength, resistance, and durability. He has the ability to turn himself into a human torch. He has a rocket jump quirk. He has elastability, Elasta baby. He has reality distortion, which is broken. He has self-duplication. He can create clones, mimicry, so he can look like people. He can turn into a demon. He can literally grow and shrink. He can teleport. He can phase. And he has interdimensional travel, as well as telekinesis and laser vision. Bro, that's OP. Not only that, but he can also turn into water. I completely forgot to mention that. But like, just stop to think about how just dumb broken that is. He has like 17 quirks, I believe I just listed. That is just beyond anything that normally would happen in the MHA world. So once this ends up happening and they find out about like 4 of Izuku's quirks on the quirk doctor, they end up sending him to another doctor, someone who they believe will have more of a better grasp on Izuku's quirks, an old family friend named Edna. They fly out to America, and that's where she gets down to work. She gets down to business, plays some Mozart, and ends up finding out all of this baby's quirks, right? Like everything she could have possibly found out, she finds out in a flash. Now, at this current moment, both of his siblings are already like they're already getting to the point where they're going to UA High and all that stuff. So they all have their own lives, right? They're busy. And Izuku is going to be spending the next like 4 years with Edna while, the Incredible family ends up doing their own things. And by Incredible family, I mean Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible. They end up founding an agency, and it becomes very, very well known throughout Japan. They become very popular heroes, and they're ranked the number 3 and 4 hero respectively. So Izuku's going to be born to a pro hero family, and that's already going to be causing some major issues for Izuku down the line. He's going to have so much expectations, so many people are going to want so many things out of him, and Izuku's just going to kind of have to live up to his family name, his siblings. He's going to have to do all of these things. Think Bronny James Jr. Like, this kid is, he's just a kid, but since he's the son of like one of the NBA's GOATs, now he has all these expectations on him. That's basically what's happening to Izuku. And what ends up happening is essentially for his first couple of years of life, by the time that, he's done being with Edna and he turns 5 years old, his 2 siblings, he never really got too much interactions with them. And now they're basically pro heroes saving the world alongside their parents, who joined their agency, with Dash becoming like a very, very popular hero early on, and Invisigirl becoming very, very popular as well. I mean, Dash is just, this man is fast. Like, you're not catching him. He just is incredible. And when it comes to, Invisible Girl, she has force fields and invisibility. It's pretty broken, and she becomes a very, very well-known hero as soon as she makes her debut. So as the first kid of the Incredibles, she ends up blowing up, and Dash, being like the brother, he ends up blowing up as well because of just his charisma, personality, and power. It just makes him a magnet for attention. Izuku just watches all this go down, and he eventually ends up kind of moving back to Japan, where most of the time he's under the care of nannies, and he never really sees his family too often during the daytime. Of course, he sees them at night when, Mr. and Mrs. Incredible aren't working. But as for Dash and Violet, they ended up moving out a while ago, and now they basically live at their agencies, running, they basically live at the agency, like near that area, where they don't want to spend all the time in the world with their parents. So they ended up moving out, getting their own places respectively, and meeting people that they were both liked a lot. And Izuku at this point is 5 years old, and he desperately seeks the attention of his parents. Obviously, his parents think that his quirks are extremely impressive, but Think about it. You're 5 years old. You have superhero parents. You have so much to live up to. And even though you have all these powerful quirks and all that stuff, it's as if that your parents are never really there for you. It's strange. In some sense, you want to prove that you're worthy of their time. And in another, you kind of decide that you want to prove that you're better than your siblings so that they can, like you more. So as the years went by, Izuku would go to prestigious schools and would end up actually meeting somebody by the name of Tenya Ida. He would end up becoming one of his friends, and while Izuku isn't exactly going to be like the best friend of Ida, they get along and they hang out every once in a while. Not only that, but Izuku actually ends up meeting a certain girl by the name of Momo Yahirozu very early on. And for his teenage years, Izuku pretty much ends up getting a huge grasp over his powers as a whole. He ends up mastering all 17 of his abilities after training with them rigorously every single day. During the summers, he would often go to Edna to work on his powers and get costume modifications as every year went by. Obviously, he always had to deal with the Incredibles like costume design, but Izuku never really liked it. Something about it was just strange, but he couldn't quite get his finger about it. He wanted to be his own hero. He wanted to stand out from the family. He wanted to be his own person, but he never exactly had the choice. Fast forward to the year when he's 15 years old, and he's now taking the recommendation exam to get into UA, meaning he never ends up meeting Uraraka, and none of those initial interactions end up happening. Instead, he ends up forming more of a close friendship, if you know what I mean, with Momo Yahirozu, and he ends up becoming really, really good friends with Ida. He does not end up getting in through recommendations, and instead has to take the provisional license exam. This time, what ends up happening is Uraraka would end up being saved by a pro hero who was on standby, and yeah, she still ends up making her way into UA. Izuku, safe to say, passes the test with his just incredible plethora of quirks that he can use at his disposal for any single task that comes at him, like whatsoever. Anything that can happen, he has a quirk ready for every single scenario. And sometimes he likes to mix and match. Like sometimes he'll straight phase it in and then come in with an electricity punch. Like this man has created so many super moves that it's just not normal. Like it's not funny how many he has. But I digress. So what ends up happening from here is essentially Izuku ends up getting into the school, and his first day of UA High rolls around the corner. He ends up being dropped off in a limo alongside Momo, since he ended up picking her and Ida up, and they all end up arriving around the same time. Immediately, as soon as they walk into the classroom, Ida would go bother Bakugo, as Momo and Izuku would end up getting to the front of the class where they take seats, and they just simply wait for their teacher. Izuku quickly is able to notice that Aizawa is the one just sleeping there, and Izuku's just like, oh, I mean, teacher's sleeping. Whatever, let's just leave him alone. And so they wait. Izuku talks to Momo for a while until essentially Aizawa wakes up, and Izuku then immediately stays quiet alongside Momo. They look to the front of the classroom, and Aizawa would say, it took you guys 8 seconds to settle down. That's not gonna do. Throw these on and meet me outside. The class would go on to do so, and from here, they would all be outside, where people would end up noticing who Izuku is. They're like, wait, you're the son of the pro heroes? The Incredibles, right? Oh my god, it's an honor to be in your classroom. Like, I can't wait to learn so many things from you. Izuku would nod, be happy, and he's like, yeah, like, thank you guys for acknowledging me for things that my family does, but, you know, I'm trying to make my name for myself. Aizawa would look at Izuku and say he's expecting great things from him, and Izuku would nod, telling him that he promises he won't disappoint. From here, Aizawa would go on to toss him the ball to Bakugo, not to Izuku, and Bakugo throws the ball, getting a huge score. When Izuku sees this, he decides that, oh, so they're going to be taking a little bit of a quirk apprehension test. Sounds good. From here, they end up going into the next couple of events, which the first one I'm going to be saying is going to be the 50-meter dash. But seeing as Izuku has a rocket jump ability, he simply uses that to make his way straight towards the finish line, clearing it faster than anybody else could. When it comes to the side-to-side stuff, he transformed into the not that. Instead, he ended up using his teleportation to teleport from side to side so fast that it was as if he was doing side-to-side steps. When it came to the grip test, he turned into his demon form and destroyed the thing. And everybody was just in shock at how broken this man Izuku is. Todoroki would be wondering how he uses all these quirks in tandem with each other, and he seems so proficient at it. Izuku explains that he's basically been doing nothing but training his whole life, and he ends up nodding, saying that that makes sense. Bakugo feels very inferior to Izuku because the things that he can do, Izuku could basically do better. He can create flames and stuff like that from his palms and explosions, but Izuku has super strength. He can turn into a human torch. He has all these things that could completely counter him, and Bakugo himself knows that he's never going to be the #1 hero with somebody like Izuku there. So he ends up just kind of having to accept this early on, and he ends up more or less trying to create a rivalry with Izuku the first day, but Izuku doesn't even acknowledge Bakugo's existence. Strange. Bakugo never thought he would find himself in this position. That said, the day would end and the next day of class would happen. Aizawa would introduce them to each other and tell them to pick their class rep. They would end up picking Izuku and Momo, and this time Izuku's not about to shy away from the big leagues. I mean, he's pretty much been in the spotlight his whole life, so he decides that whatever, he'll take the job. He knows Ida wanted it, but he would tell Ida that he could kind of help him out with these things. And Ida would say, so I'll be like your co-leader? And then Izuku would be like, more like my co-leader, since Momo's my co-leader. From here, Ida would say, I thank you for the opportunity, bowing and doing his normal, stick in the mud thing. From here, the next day comes around and we meet a brand new person. All Might busts in through the door, smiling as usual, and he ends up informing the class that he'll be teaching them today. The class would break out into just this amazing, like, oh my god, it's All Might! But Izuku would be one of the only people who was actually calm. He'd be like, yo, All Might, what's up? I didn't know you would be teaching a UA. And people would look at Izuku being like, you know All Might? With a couple of people in the class being like, of course he knows All Might. He's the son of Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl. What'd you guys expect? From here, Izuku would end up dabbing All Might up and telling him that he's going to be showing him a little something today. With All Might saying, you're going to throw a little razzle dazzle in there. And Izuku would say, you know it, All Might. From here, he would proceed to smile and All Might would reveal the costumes in the walls before everybody else would be getting extremely excited, and they would all rush to put them on and meet outside, where they would end up picking their 2-on-2 battles. As for Izuku, his teammate is going to be Mineta, and he's going to be fighting against none other than Bakugo and Dark Shadow. Yeah, Bakugo and Dark Shadow. Why not? The match starts something like this. Izuku would immediately go over towards Mineta and be like, yo, so it looks like we're partners? And Mineta looks at him, just be like, oh my god, your sister's so hot. Izuku looks at him and he's like, bro, that's my sister, bro. What are you saying? And Mineta's like, sorry, Midoriya, she's so hot. But Izuku just looks at him and he's like, all right, he's a weirdo. I'm not even about to deal with this man's stuff. But from here, he proceeds to essentially just look away and just look towards the room that he's going to essentially be at and try to grab the bomb in. As soon as Izuku starts the match, Izuku teleports instantly into the room where Bakugo and Tokiyami both would be at respectively. Tokiyami would try using his Dark Shadow ability to immediately hit Deku, but he simply would phase right through it, and Bakugo throws an explosion at Izuku at the same time, which ends up scaring Tokiyami away, rendering him weaker than he normally would be. So from here, Izuku would simply just begin using his teleportation ability to completely outmaneuver both of them and say, oh, too slow, just being a complete cocky person, until eventually he ends up saying, all right, it's about time as he holds one hand out and he levitates the both of them before smashing them into the ground and into the air, and they would both be kind of startled by that, before he then proceeds to shoot his laser vision right at the direction of Tokiyami's Dark Shadow, who immediately just goes back into his self, and Izuku would then transform into his demon state, as he then looks at Bakugo and punches this man straight through a wall. Bakugo gets like crashing out, and from here, Izuku would just look at Bakugo as he's like, all right, I think I might have overdone it a little bit. Before then going over towards the direction of the bomb, Tokiyami would stand in front of him trying to make one last stand before Izuku, but Izuku would simply phase right through him as he tried to hit him, go to the bomb and touch it. As All Might would say, hero team wins. Report back. They would all end up doing so, and Momo, of course, she would end up saying Izuku's the MVP. Mineta is just like, I'm so thankful that I was on the team with Izuku. But Izuku's just like, bro, get away from me, you're a creep. And Mineta would feel pretty saddened by this, but he knows it's true. That said, about a week of normal schooling would go by and Izuku would get very, very accustomed to his classmates. I mean, at this point, Izuku finally feels like he's starting to make a own life for himself. People are slowly starting to forget that he's the son of a pro hero, and they're more looking at him as his own person, saying that Izuku is actually way more impressive than his parents were at his age, or even his siblings. Izuku proceeds to break All Might's records, and his own family records. And the school itself begins to just look at Izuku as a complete phenom. He's 100% going to be the next #1 hero. And All Might would have even ended up offering Izuku all for one. I mean, one for all. But Izuku was like, nah, I don't need it, All Might. Honestly, if I was to take any more quirks, I just wouldn't know what to do with it. I already have 17. And my super strength isn't that much behind yours. As All Might would say, you have that right. Before Izuku would then tell him that if he ever needs a little bit more strength, he could always just grow in size, and he could potentially match All Might. Before All Might would just look to Izuku and say that the offer will always stand. Before then, proceeding to essentially just keep the quirk to himself. I mean, with Izuku around, there's no need for passing down of the quirk. All Might has 1000% faith in Izuku, and he thinks that it's about time that All for One goes, has its time to rest. Izuku's going to be holding that torch, and he's going to continue the defeating of All for One. That said, Mirio never ends up getting one for all, nor does anybody else in the classroom, and All Might ends up keeping his prime a little bit more. Now, one thing that I do want to have a genuine possibility for is All Might actually being healed, and I'm going to look into that really quick before I make a hasty decision. I'm back, and I figured out that, yup, I could definitely make it happen. Using Jack-Jack's power of reality distortion, I think that it would be a perfect moment for Izuku to put his hand on All Might's area of his damage and essentially distort reality around the area where All Might was affected and had his wound inflicted on him. Essentially what Izuku does is he distorts it to the point where it pretty much becomes normal. Because if you distort what's already distorted, then, I mean, in theory, it should potentially become normal. So that's just the theory that I'm going to be basing off the rest of, whatever happens now. Izuku, after hearing All Might would feel as if he can no longer transform into his skinny skeletal form, and he would look towards the direction of Izuku before bringing this man in for a full power All Might hug. Izuku would end up being like, "Oh my, you're crushing me," and All Might would be like, "Sorry, Midoriya, I didn't know the extent of my strength anymore." Before Izuku would say, yeah, all good. It's not like you just crushed me or anything. Nah, it's fine." And All Might would just begin thanking Deku. From here, Izuku would go home, and about one more week worth of school would go by where they just get to know each other. Izuku's making a name for himself, and he's having a blast at UA. This man is just breaking records every single second. Could you imagine having all these quirks in the My Hero Academia world? Like, you go into school, everybody else has one, maybe two quirks if they're super lucky, and just so happen to also be the son of Endeavor. But you have 17 that are so much more broken than the one that he has. So it's like, bro, it's so broken. Could you imagine that? It's like having it'd basically be as if you had superpowers in real life. That's how much better than everybody else you'd be. It's just insane. Jack is a beast, and I need to see this man all grown up using his powers to full effect. Because I swear, I feel as if Jack has more powers, even to show. Because if they were to make an Incredibles 3, then I would love to see something where Jack ends up getting even more powers, which sounds completely ludicrous, but I genuinely see it as a possibility. That said, though, the USJ, you're right, the USJ. That happens, and it actually goes a lot different than in canon, just due to the fact that enter Izuku Midoriya with 17 quirks. What ends up going down is essentially they end up making their way towards the USJ. No surprise, they end up having the speech with the Hero 13. Again, nothing changes. Eventually though, when Kurogiri ends up entering the scene and Aizawa ends up proclaiming that these are not fake villains, the first thing that Izuku does is essentially use his electrokinesis to aim his hand at the direction of the villain Kurogiri and shoot a stream of electricity much similar to the Kekkei Genkai in Naruto, where it simply like lunges at him and it would shock Kurogiri's metal plate. Now, from here, Izuku would pretty much turn into his Human Torch version and begin flying towards the direction of Kurogiri. As Kurogiri at this point is kind of like shocked in like a weird shock state. But Izuku would then use his reality distortion ability to hold on to Kurogiri's metallic part, as it's as if Kurogiri gets returned back to normal. How do I explain this? If you guys don't know the thing, then huge spoiler warning here, but Kurogiri is actually a Nomu that was once Aizawa's friend. Now Aizawa's friend was named Shirakumo, and he had these incredible cloud powers. He ended up dying in a mission one day when they were all in UA, and from there his body was found by Dr. Ujiko and then transformed into a Nomu for Shigaraki, but I digress. Essentially what ends up happening here is when Aizawa sees Shirakumo's body fall to the floor, he rushes in and he's like, "Shirakumo, answer, is it really you?" You know, he's pretty much crying. And Izuku would just look at the direction of Aizawa as this man is just utterly shocked. None of the students have even been teleported away quite yet, and Izuku would decide that he definitely is going to be needing to do something about all those villains. He could probably take them all out on his own, so he's going to be definitely doing that himself. He ends up using his self-duplication quirk as he creates like 100 copies of himself, and then they all proceed to go in and proceed to absolutely mollywop every single person present in the USJ building. They all get absolutely demolished, and Shigaraki ends up being like, What? It's no fair. Nomu, kill the brat. He seems to be more of a threat than even All Might himself. How could we not have thought about this?" Before possibly Nomu comes in and screeches at the top of its lungs, then throwing a haymaker at the direction of Izuku, which Izuku would turn into metal, and it's as if the punch, like it hit and it sent him back a little bit. But Izuku would then clink his knuckles together and pretty much grow in size to the same size of the Nomu, before then shooting laser vision right at the direction of the Nomu's legs. It would create holes, but they would heal immediately, and Izuku would look at it before being shocked as he gets hit with an uppercut sent flying back, and Shigaraki would say, "This thing has regeneration and shock absorption. The Nomu is made to kill All Might himself." As soon as Izuku hears this, he's like, "All Might? You think you're gonna kill All Might? You couldn't even kill me, much less All Might." Before he then proceeds to say, "Look, I'm gonna be giving you one chance to get away," with him then saying, "Just kidding." He would then transform into his demon state and his strength would multiply so much. He would then begin to get into a full fist clash with the Nomu, where he turns his fist into iron while he's in his demonic state. And using his normal super strength, plus the super strength of being like metal, plus the super strength of being a demon, he ends up completely mollywopping this Nomu, punching him straight out of the USJ stadium and sending this man flying, like just done. This Nomu is gone, never coming back. And he would then divert his attention towards Shigaraki, who is standing quaking in fear, yelling, "Kurogiri, Kurogiri!" But nobody's coming. Kurogiri transformed back into Shirakumo, all thanks to Izuku. From here, Izuku then looks at Shigaraki and says that he is one strange little man-child, before then walking up to him slowly, and a black portal would appear on the floor underneath Shigaraki. Izuku would say, "Oh no you don't," and Shigaraki would fall straight through the portal, as Izuku would say, "I almost had him. Damn it." He then proceeds to use his ability of interdimensional travel to essentially break out of the third wall into the fourth and look at you guys. He looks at you guys and he's like, "Oh, wow, people are watching me. Looks like I'm not real. Well, if I'm not real, then we might as well go into a sponsorship break. It's time for Zether to sell out." As anime fans, we love to show our support to our favorite shows by rocking anime apparel. But something I'm pretty sure we can all agree on is it's so expensive. So I've partnered up with Fandom to bring you all affordable, high quality anime merch that you are sure to love. And if you use my code ZETHER at checkout, you can even get an extra 10% off the already affordable merch. Keep in mind, it does come from overseas sellers, so its sizing is going to be different since it's overseas. That said, let's get back into the video. Cutting back into from the story from our sponsor break, what ends up happening is essentially Izuku ends up using his interdimensional travel ability to essentially locate where Shigaraki was teleported to. Once he does that, he ends up teleporting to that very same location, where once he ends up arriving there, what Izuku essentially would end up doing is landing right in front of the big bad of the entire My Hero series, All For One. And All For One would clap. Looks like the son of the Incredibles is much more of a threat than I anticipated. Looks like we'll need to put All Might on the back burner. He would look to Shigaraki before saying, "Shigaraki, get out of here." And he would say, "Master, I can help." But All For One would look to him and tell him to leave now, before Izuku would say he's not going anywhere. He then teleports to Shigaraki and teleports him straight to Tartarus, where everybody just watches as this like man-child appears before them and tries to run away and escape, but he's not going to. Shigaraki gets taken to prison, and All For One, once he sees Izuku once more, gets very, very angry at that. He shoots his black-like tendrils at the direction of Izuku, who would simply phase right through them, and with his normal hand, which isn't phasing at the moment, would hold the tendrils as he would end up putting 10 million volts of electricity into it, sending shocks through All For One's body, as this man gets completely fried. From here, Izuku would say, "You know, All Might's told me all about you and the things that you did to him, as well as his master. And you know what? I can't let that slide." Before then using his levitation ability and then flying straight at the direction of All For One, as he holds him up with one arm with a super shrink that begins beating on this man with a demon arm, as he punches and punches and punches and just completely begins beating into this man over and over and over until eventually he throws him up into the air, transforms into his giant state, and in much like an Injustice like X-ray super move type thing, he smashes this man All For One back into the earth and then proceeds to use his rocket jump to send him flying right back to All For One, where he then uses a Human Torch lit fist and punches down at All For One's mask, just completely shattering it, leaving All For One there clinging to life by a thread, as Izuku then looks at him and he says, "You know, work's done now," before he then grabs All For One's body and tosses him into another dimension, just completely leaving this man for dead, before he then completely teleports right back to the USJ in a span of like 5 minutes, and people are like, "Where'd you go? We were worried about you." Izuku says he handled some business, and he then tells him if they can finally begin the USJ. Aizawa would just look to Izuku before thanking him on like his knees, and he would end up telling Izuku that like for now class is canceled, he needs to figure things out with his friend here, before they then send him to a hospital where he gets checked out, and he ends up explaining what had happened for all those years, with him actually telling the heroes about the lair of All For One and where it's located. Once he's able to do that, the heroes would end up wanting to launch a full-scale attack, but when they arrive, there's no All For One. There's simply Dr. Ujiko, and that's all there is. Dr. Ujiko's there, working on some projects. There's no moves, but there's no Shigaraki or All For One. And All Might is shocked, but Izuku teleports to that location with all the heroes watching, and even his parents both there, as he then says, "You know, he's not here, All Might, because I took him out." All Might looks at Izuku and he's like, "You what?" And Izuku says that yeah, he took him out. He's done. Like he dealt with him. All Might would ask him if he means what he thinks he means, and Izuku says, "I terminated him." Before All Might would say, "Look, this is gonna be a secret between us two, okay?" And he would then proceed to look at Izuku as, you know, All Might would just say that All For One probably got away. Before his parents would then begin to acknowledge Izuku, saying that they're really proud for everything he's doing in UA, saying that they've heard all the news and that they can't wait to throw him a huge banquet when he turns 16 years old next year. Izuku would actually smile for one of the first times since he actually feels acknowledged, appreciated by his parents. This is a feeling Izuku is not very much used to, and Izuku is relishing in this. He feels at peace, at home. He feels as if he belongs. So Izuku's happy. And we now cut to a small 1-week break where the students have it off since the USJ was attacked and UA had to deal with the media issues which are associated to that. They had to do that thing. So yeah, after that happens, Aizawa informs everybody about the the UA Sports Festival, and Shirakumo actually turns into like a co-teacher for Aizawa, as you know, he ends up also ending up taking in the information that Aizawa gives, and Aizawa would even end up informing Shirakumo that he can hop into his agency and hop right back into pro hero work. But Shirakumo would say that honestly, he doesn't know if he's ready to just jump back into it. He's gonna take like an off year and just be with Aizawa, his friend, and President Mike. That's what he wants for now. Aizawa would smile, and from here, everybody would end up pretty much just fast forwarding to the day where the UA Sports Festival happens. Now, seeing as Izuku ended up taking the the recommendation exam, he doesn't end up giving the speech. Bakugo does, and Bakugo would end up saying that he's gonna be beating everybody. And from here, everybody boos him, and yeah, the first race begins. Now, I wish I could tell you guys, oh my god, this race goes so hard, but remember, Izuku has teleportation. He just teleports to the finish line. I'm sorry, guys, but he teleports to the finish line. And when he does, he would end up turning to the stands to see everybody just admiring Izuku. He feels at home, at peace. Feels as if he finally has his own recognition. And he would see his parents and his siblings up in the stands with them cheering him on, saying, "Come on, Squirt, you better do as good as I did when I was your age," coming from Dash, with Violet saying, "Don't listen to that knucklehead, do its best." And Izuku would have a smile on his face, finally being acknowledged by his family more than what he's used to. Izuku's having a pretty good time. And from here, we have the next event, which is the cavalry battle. Seeing as nobody wanted to join his team because, well, he has 10 million points and everybody's going to be after him, Izuku just decided that maybe instead of having Momo and Ida join his team, he's just going to do a little trick that he likes to do. He creates duplicates of himself and says, "I'm ready." And from here, 4 Izukus would just jump on top of one, as the one that's holding them up is a demon version, with all of them just resting, as you know, they're all just doing their own thing. As soon as the event starts, what ends up happening is essentially they stay there, not even moving. They're just phasing. As everybody tries to rip the bandana from their heads, they can't. They're just literally just sitting there phasing through. They can't touch it. It's as if Izuku and his duplicates don't even exist in that plane of existence. And that's because they're actually not in that plane of existence currently. They're in another world. They're having fun, I guess you could say. That said, what ends up happening after this is the 1v1 battles. Now, the first person that Izuku is going to have to face against is going to be Shinso. Now, as soon as the battle would start, Shinso would look to Izuku as he would say, "Must be nice to have all those quirks, to be gifted, to be born into some pro hero family, to have everything handed to you. You're lucky, you know that? You're so lucky." Before he then proceeds to speak back. But when he does, and Izuku would be under the mind control of Shinso, what ends up happening is the complete opposite of what Shinso could have possibly wanted. Essentially, Izuku would immediately snap into his demonic form as he rushes at Shinso and begins to beat this man senseless, until Shinso passes out and Izuku is just stuck in his demon form, realizing what he had just done, with Shinso pretty much unconscious because he just got the beating of his life from Izuku, and Izuku's apologizing a lot for what happened, saying that he had no control over his body for some reason. Shinso couldn't even explain what happened, and people in the stands would just be like, "I mean, he won, right?" Everybody would nod, and they're like, "All right, then, good stuff," before everybody just starts cheering and forgetting all about Shinso. Poor Shinso. From here, however, what would end up happening after is essentially Izuku goes on to fight against Shoto Todoroki. We all know the way that he likes to fight. He likes to use his eyes to keep people at bay, keep a solid distance between them. But when you're fighting against somebody like Izuku, sorry to burst your bubble, buddy, but that's not going to work. As soon as Shoto shoots a geyser of ice at him, what Izuku would do is transform into metal before then proceeding to just punch straight at the ice. Like, just starts breaking it with this bare physical force before appearing before Todoroki and saying, "Yoo-hoo!" And Todoroki would be like, "What?" before he then tries to shoot more ice at the direction of Izuku, but he simply turns into his fire state, his human torch state, as he just begins walking straight through the ice, burning it, melting it the second he makes contact with it. And Todoroki would just look at Izuku, as Izuku would say, just accept defeat. I have like 16 other quirks I could use to take you down. Todoroki would get angry and say, whatever, I'll beat you with my ice, that's all I'll use. He would then shoot his ice towards the direction of Deku, who would phase right through it. And Deku would then proceed to hold one hand up as he uses his telekinesis ability to lift Shoto up off the ground and slam him onto the grass, as Todoroki gets eliminated immediately, and the final battle would then be called Izuku versus Bakugo Katsuki. What ends up happening here is Bakugo lunges at Izuku and tries to shoot explosions at Izuku's direction, but Izuku uses his metal version of his body to essentially cancel it all out, until eventually he decides that something better to counter him would be to turn into water. And every time that Bakugo hits Izuku with an explosion, it doesn't do anything, it simply just reshapes the shape of his body. And Izuku is loving it. He pretty much proceeds to jump on top of Bakugo and kind of begin drowning this man in a sense, where he covers Bakugo's body with his own, and the water begins holding Bakugo prison to the point where he can't breathe. Bakugo gets knocked out, and everybody in the stands would be going wild for Izuku, saying that this man is going to be the next number one. Chants would be going on, next number one, next number one, next number one. Everybody is just excited for this man Izuku. Like it's just fun all around. That's as light as I could put it. It's just so much fun all around. We cut to the future. A little bit of a time skip, but I actually have to explain what the time skip is. So, Izuku obviously ends up winning the sports festival. Following this, Izuku and his family, for the first time in forever, literally sit down, go out to dinner, have a fun day, and the attention is on Izuku. He is loving it, but he knows that this isn't always going to be like this. And he actually ends up discussing with his parents the possibility of him actually maybe not joining their agency. He says that he wants to do his own thing. He wants to become his own hero. Maybe not follow in the footsteps of his parents, become a hero like them, but become a hero who stands for something different. The Incredible family would just look at him and say, I mean, what? Did you think we were going to force you into it? Izuku looks shocked. He's like, wait, so you're not angry? And they would say, why would we be angry? I mean, we want you to be happy. That's all we've ever wanted. From here, Izuku gets embraced by everybody, and he would end up telling them all that he'll make them proud, with Dash giving him a knuckle on the head saying, you better make us proud, before Izuku would then use his levitation ability to hold Dash up into the air. And Dash is like, nah, that's not fair. Put me back down, let's see what you can do. Before Izuku puts Dash right back down onto the ground, and he rushes at Izuku for a punch, but Izuku turns into metal and he just gets hit in the face, and Dash is like, hurt. Before he then proceeds to say, whatever, you win this time, but maybe not next time. As Violet just starts laughing, and from here, the family has a good time. We cut to them all going back to school, with the pro hero Midnight going into class, and when Izuku sees her, Momo gets pretty mad at him, to say the least. Like, she sees the way that Izuku looks at Midnight, and she does not like what she sees. But what's she gonna do about it? I mean, it's Midnight. From here, what ends up happening is they pick their pro hero names, and Izuku stops to think. He's like, what do I name myself? I can't name myself like another Incredible, and I can't just name myself my normal name. What do I call myself? He looks around for inspiration and genuinely can't find anything. He's like, I never really thought about it. So he ends up telling the teacher that he doesn't know for now, but he'll choose a name later on. She ends up telling him sure thing that he has until he graduates from UA to choose a hero name, and Izuku would say that he's given all the time in the world to choose. Make sure to comment down below what name you guys want, and I'm going to be pinning the comment down below of the pro hero name that Izuku gets. So if you guys want to find out what I ended up naming him, just comment down below some dope ideas for Izuku's pro hero name. Make sure to use inspiration from the Incredibles movies and names like that. So yeah, cutting back into the story, we then cut into them learning about their internships and stuff like that. And since Izuku's actually friends with Ida this time around, when Ida ends up finding out about his brother and ends up going to the internship of the Pro Hero Manual, Izuku finds that very strange. Like, very strange. And Izuku would discuss this with Ida, saying that, he doesn't have to go to Hosu, the city that the villain that he's already trying to get in contact with is going to be in. Why does he want to go to Hosu so bad? Ida would say that it's nothing to worry about, that he just looks up to Manuel lying out of his ass. And Izuku would say, oh, well, if that's the case, then you wouldn't mind if I went along with you, right? Before he then proceeds to sign his paper that he wants to go with Manuel, and Ida just kind of is like, rats, before then proceeding to just decide whatever. He's going to do what he needs to do regardless of whether Izuku agrees or not, telling him that he better stay out of his way, that he would do the same thing if one of his family members perished, with Izuku saying he wouldn't because he knows that they wouldn't want that. They are not the type of people who would wish revenge on anybody, regardless of what they do. That's what mom and dad taught me, and that's what they instilled into both of them. So no, I wouldn't, Ida. Ida just scoffs and ends up trying to do his own thing. Eventually the day would come when Stain would end up having his own little thing of killing people, and Ida would end up finding him in an alleyway after running away from Manuel after hearing some screaming. From here, he ends up running to the alleyway where Stain is at, and he ends up rushing in, throwing a full power reciprocal burst kick. Stain dodges it, stabs him with a knife, and Ida's now down for the count. He can't move anymore, but Izuku arrives right in time to grab Ida and the other pro hero, teleporting to the roof, where he would put them both down and look to Ida before saying, I'll talk to you later, before he then teleports right back down to Stain and says that he'll have to excuse his friend. He was just trying to get revenge for his brother, before Stain would say he's a fake hero, out for revenge and out for his own personal goals. Before Izuku says he's not a fake hero, he just made a mistake. Everybody can make a mistake once or twice, and emotions are very powerful. He'll learn to overcome things like that sooner or later. You'll see. But for now, I need to take you away. Before he then proceeds to look towards Stain, who says, I don't think so. He rushes in at Izuku's direction, and Izuku turns into metal, so he couldn't cut him. So now Stain was pretty much rendered useless, and Stain's sword just completely shattered upon first contact with Izuku. Izuku would hold Stain up with his levitation ability, and he would begin to pretty much crush his fist as he began to pretty much compress Stain's body, until Stain felt so much pain that he just ended up passing out. Following that, Izuku would fly off with Stain using his levitation ability since Tartarus was nearby, and he dropped him off as he would simply say to make sure to take good care of him, saying that he doesn't seem like that bad of a guy. But from here, he would end up going back to Ida and scolding this man heavily, being like, why would you do that? You're crazy, yada yada yada. Ida just is ashamed because Izuku told him what the outcome would be, and it happened exactly as Izuku said. So now Ida has nothing to say. He has nothing to say for what he did, and he's kind of just ashamed for his actions. He wishes he didn't do what he did, but there's no take backsies. So he's just gonna have to move past it and learn from this experience. From here, the dog would come in and tell them that the pro hero that's gonna be taking credit for this is Manuel. So Manuel's credibility in the hero world ends up going up quite a bit, and the recognition is nice or whatever, but he knows, maybe Izuku should have gotten the credit. But if he does, then his pro hero license is going to be suspended for a bit. So he takes the credit and the glory, and they all go back to school where they now have the finals. Now, I would love to cover the finals exam, except I wouldn't, so we're going to skip it. And also the studying process. Just know he studies with Ida and Momo, two of the smartest people in his class, so suffice to say, he'll be fine. When it comes to the person that he ends up fighting, I'd say that I'm still going to be sticking with Bakugo and Izuku versus All Might. But All Might doesn't have his restraints, and he's fully healthy. So when Bakugo ends up telling Izuku to get lost, that he doesn't need his help, Izuku just shrugs. Okay, alright, you don't need my help, go fight All Might. Bakugo then proceeds to get absolutely beat and mollywiped just like he would have in the original, but Izuku doesn't save him. Bakugo gets completely knocked out, and following this, Izuku shows himself to All Might before then saying, I always did wonder what it would be like to fight you at your full strength. Don't disappoint me, All Might. Before he then shoots laser vision at the direction of All Might, and he dodges out of the way, using his telekinesis ability to throw objects towards the direction of All Might, which All Might would simply punch away with his wind pressure. All Might would come in for a full power punch as Deku would phase right through it, teleporting on top of All Might as he goes in for a punch, and All Might would barely be able to dodge out of the way. Izuku would then turn into a small state of himself as he runs up All Might's legs, And All Might would be like, get off of me, as he throws a full power slap at his leg, which Izuku immediately transforms into metal and grows as he catches the slap of All Might in his hand and he slams him into the ground as All Might is like, what? And he begins slamming him back and forth on the ground as All Might is like, all right, this is just humiliating. From here, All Might would jump up and say, Texas, smash, as he comes in with a blow, and Izuku would turn into straight fire and heat at the same time, causing, that's dumb. Why would he do that when he could just turn into water? He turns into water and gets splattered all over the place. The water would then regroup back into Izuku, and All Might is like, huh? Before he then proceeds to rush at the direction of All Might, turn himself to water, and then electrocute himself to the point where the lightning would end up coursing through the body of All Might, and he gets shocked for just a moment. Long enough for Izuku to decide, all right, I'm done. He would then throw a rocket jump punch, which basically he runs at a building and rocket jumps off of it into All Might as he sends a punch straight into All Might's gut and sends this man crashing through like 17 buildings, before he then appears right in front of All Might using his mimicry ability to transform into that of Gran Torino when he was young. And when All Might sees that, he's like, Master! Before Izuku would say, student. And he would transform back into himself before he then proceeds to say, it's time to go night-night, All Might, as he throws one last punch at the face of All Might, who gets completely knocked out. And from here, Izuku's like, I can't believe it. I beat All Might! And at full strength, no less. As everybody was watching and they're like, I knew he was strong, but this is insane. He's already stronger than All Might. They would go crazy. And the Force Training arc, it happens. The provisional license thing, it happens as well. We're going to skip to the overhaul arc. You may be asking, why are you skipping all of this content? Listen to me. I don't like covering the provisional hero license exam. There's no stakes. There's no reason for me to cover it. Not only that, but Toga's not even going to be infiltrating at this time. As for the Force Training arc, nobody infiltrates it. There's no reason to cover something that is just a normal school event. So, with no real stakes or anything. So, yeah. And it's also not even fun like the UA Sports Festival actually is. There's no real like tension there, like anybody wanting to fight against each other, or no cool like student fights happening. You know what I mean? So that's really why I decided to skip through that portion. That said though, they end up meeting the Big Three. And the Big Three's leader, Mirio Togata, ends up actually offering the class a spar. Now, this goes just like it does in canon, except this time when Mirio ends up phasing into the earth, and he like goes into that state where when he's phased, he can't breathe or anything. Izuku uses his fourth dimensional travel, or his interdimensional travel, to pretty much appear right in front of Mirio, who is just like holding his breath at this moment as Izuku waves to him. And when Mirio pops back up out of his phasing state, Izuku was standing there. Mirio would go in to throw a punch, but Izuku would phase right through it and say, feels a lot different when you're not the one phasing through people, right? As he then throws a full powered kick at Mirio's direction, sending him crashing into some like walls. And Mirio gets back up asking what that was, with Izuku saying it's his phasing ability, before he then proceeds to teleport behind Mirio and be like, peekaboo, before he then proceeds to essentially just use his reality distortion so that Mirio couldn't use his quirk for just long enough for Deku to essentially just knock him out. He just hits him one time with a chop at the back of the neck, and Mirio gets completely wasted. Like, this man is done for. But yeah, eventually he ends up offering Izuku the opportunity to intern with his pro hero that he goes to, Sir Nadai. And I would love to tell you guys that Sir Nadai ends up telling Izuku, hey, kid, get this stamp because, you know, there's certain requirements. Remember, Izuku doesn't have one for all, so there's no reason for Sir Nadai to be as cold to Izuku as he was in the original. Not only that, but he's the son of a pro hero. And when he looks into the future, the only thing he could see is Izuku being successful every time. So Izuku gets let in after making Sir Nadai laugh once, and eventually they go on their travel where they end up encountering Overhaul. Now this goes just like many of you would expect. Izuku's not about to let some little girl suffer while he can actively do something about it. So when Mirio ends up telling Izuku to hand Eri back to him, he does so. However, when he does so, Izuku drops Eri into the ground and holds Overhaul with one hand as he says, "Skadoosh." Just kidding, he doesn't say that. But seriously though, he ends up tossing Overhaul into a different dimension where he'll never escape. And Mirio looks at Izuku and says, "What did you just do?" Izuku would say, somebody who tortures kids and beats them the way that he did doesn't deserve normal Tartarus. He deserves much worse. Before then walking away and holding Eri, telling her that he's her new older brother. Eri would smile, and Izuku would then go on to take Eri back to the school, where they would proceed to end up having no Overhaul arc, seeing as it got handled in 2.2 seconds. Izuku is so OP that genuinely that's how every single villain encounter is going to be going from here on out. For every villain that the series has ever tossed at Izuku, I see no world where Izuku's all these massive quirks are not going to help him essentially overcome the huge just wave that is, the people that he ends up fighting against. His quirks are not just normal quirks in the sense that All For One also has a bunch of quirks. They're genuine powers. They are superpowers. They're much stronger than quirks and much more evolved and just well trained. So Izuku is just in another league when it comes to his students. The UA Hero Commission would notice this and would end up essentially promoting Izuku to becoming a hero early on, making it so that he works under the same organization that Hawks works under, and getting a whole new hero costume revamp, where his costume is going to be a lot different than the one that, say, the Incredibles have. His is going to be more like Syndrome's, because I don't know if it's just me, but Syndrome's costume is so awesome. And yeah, that's the end. What'd you guys think? Did you guys like it? Did you guys hate it? If you hated it, let me know why. How could I fix it? And if you loved it, then share the video with a friend. Like the video. Comment, as it helps it do way better in the algorithm. And also, remember, ladies and gentlemen, to click on all my other what ifs because I love the views. Also, check out the merch down below if you enjoyed anything. And with that said, it has been your boy Zether. I love each and every single one of you guys. Peace.